So they come together, they pour everything into this, just like they did when they left England. They sold everything they had. And they had to even go in debt to get this ship, just to hire it. It's called the Mayflower. It's a former wine ship. It had never crossed the Atlantic. Very few ships had ever crossed the Atlantic. In fact, it was just to go around the ports of England delivering wine. This time they've got 102 passengers. They've got about 30 crew members. And they take off late. I mean, nobody travels in September, October, November on the North Atlantic in the 16th century. You're crazy. But they did. And as they took off in the fall of 1620, not knowing that their 3-week journey was going to be an 8-week journey that was going to take 66 days.
So what was it like on the boat?
Well, if you can imagine constant gales in the North Atlantic on a little boat like this, and having a boat with nothing to protect the water from going down underneath. So in that one deck that is below the main upper deck, you basically have it 4.5 feet high. You've got 102 people crammed in there. They're going back and forth at a 45-degree angle. They're all huddled together. Water is pouring down on their head, so they're constantly wet. They're barfing. Their children are barfing. They've got constant sickness and disease. They've got everybody going to the bathroom and trying to hide the smell. I mean, it must have been horrendous. They had no idea where they were. The ship was almost out of control. They find themselves with a ship that is now breaking. The main beam that holds the whole ship together, which goes horizontal, has now cracked and is coming down, and the water's pouring in. At that point, the captain comes down and says, well, prepare to meet your God. This is it. And the Pilgrims had brought, providentially, a giant screw, which was one of those screws probably that holds the bottom of a house together when you're lifting it up. And so they pushed it just right into place at the right place, put a log underneath it, twisted it in, and saved the main beam, which of course saved the ship, which saved them from disaster.
What kind of person you have to be, what kind of father you have to be to look your wife and your kids in the eyes and say, we're going to get on this kind of a boat. I know it's never crossed the Atlantic. I know this doesn't look possible, but we're going to go because it's worth it. I mean, what kind of character do you have to do something like that with your family? I mean, you're either crazy or you've got courage and you've got faith.
These are the real people that founded America. And they were real. Were they perfect? No. Did they cry out and scream? I'm sure, in fear. Did they? Were they afraid? Yes, they were. But they carried on and persevered. In fact, William Bradford, their governor, said, if we are to lose our lives in this endeavor, at least we know that our cause is just and our cause is honorable. So their perspective was, do the right thing over the long haul, and in the long run, God will bless it.
This could have been the most tragic mistake that they had ever made. But they didn't believe that. They continued to believe that God was with them, that the wind of providence was behind their back, and that nothing happens by accident. But because of this desperate situation, with no civil order to speak of, to walk into, they had to create a system by which they could all get along so that they didn't kill each other. Because remember, you had not only the Pilgrims on the ship, you had other crew members, you had businessmen, and everyone had competing ideas and agendas. And so they had to draft up something of an agreement that says, guys, we need to help each other. We need to clearly set out who we are and why we are here and agree on some rules that we're going to live by. And they made that covenant with God and with one another in a document that is now known as the Mayflower Compact. And they did this while they were still on the boat.
So I met with Dr. Paul Jaley, the president of the Plymouth Rock Foundation, to help me understand the real significance of the Mayflower Compact.
They come into agreement, saint and stranger, those from the Church of England, those from the Separatists, they join together in a civil body politic, which is of course larger than any one church. It's going to have to serve everyone. This was an act of self-government. This was not an act from somebody else telling you who your government was. In fact, they had this phrase, this would be as sure as any patent. In fact, maybe even more sure. In other words, because we did it from our own hearts.
Right.
You think about it this way. If you have a say in the laws, are you going to be more apt to be submissive to them?
Sure, of course.
Sure. And you can voluntarily consent. So that's why I would think Bradford probably meant, look, it's going to be even more sure than a patent when we do it ourselves.
Right. Because it's coming out of the convictions of our own heart,
Exactly.
and everyone gets a say in this. It's not just the king and the top down.
Exactly.
I mean, think about it. Everything that America would become famous for and would make it unique among any other nation in the world was planted into the hearts and minds of those pilgrims by their pastor, John Robinson. Here you had the seeds of the richest, freest, most prosperous nation floating in the belly of this boat, crossing the Atlantic, ready to be planted.
I'm just going to pause it here. I don't want to play the whole film. This is about the intro to discussion so that we can watch it together. This is about development. This is about developing leaders and supporting us economically and financially. It will be supported through emails and servers. We don't have links on the website. It's more secure that way. So this is take 3, as I said, and he goes in more detail about the Mayflower Compact. And then the next tape is going to be about the monument that's in Plymouth.